Inspector General workshop. We will have opportunity for public comments. If you wish to make a public comment, please fill out the comment cards which are available and give them to Ms. Levesque, who is staffing this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Levesque, for volunteering to staff this meeting. We appreciate it. Would you please mute your electronic devices? Thanks. All right. Ms. Scheibel, is your comment related to a particular agenda item? No. Okay, so that'll be 5. Wonderful. Thanks. Welcome. We're back again. We've been at this for some time, although we've had a number of inputs, and we have had this discussion over a course of months with changing committee members. So we are running out of time. So I do want to draw the committee's attention to the fact that a decision has to be offered to the Inspector General in December of this year. Is there a date in December?
I think it's December 26th.
26th, okay.
December 26th.
Remember the day after Christmas?
Or pick a day, yes. So it's given that there will be necessitate some time to bring forward whatever we decide upon, this really has to be the moment at which we strive for consensus around some number of issues. So with that, I would like to ask Ms. Yan and Mr. Merriman to help us understand what we've received and any thoughts that you have on it, and tell us how you see this process working and timeframes.
Great. Good morning, Brad Merriman, Assistant County Administrator, and with me is Leilani Yan, who is our Manager of Recruitment and Selection in our Human Resources Department. The IG Committee charged us with attempting to develop an instrument that the committee could use in the rating of the Inspector General to assist you in the decision as to whether or not to recommend for the renewal of the contract. And the direction was to use the Inspector General ordinance, the Inspector General's contract, and the associated standards that are contained in the Association of Inspector Generals documents to use as the source materials for the development of this instrument. Leilani is very experienced at these types of things, so we turned the project over to her, and I emailed that to all of you last week, and we do not have any necessarily pride of anything here, and we would like to receive your comments, and we will incorporate whatever comments and changes that the committee so directs into a final document. We did work with Ms. Steckler's office, her particularly, in the development of this, and we not only took that direction, but we took some other direction, and we tried to incorporate within each of those data elements some opportunity for narrative, not only for the individual rating elements, but in general. And we used a kind of a simplified rating system of either meets expectations or requirements or doesn't or not applicable. And again, there's, as we talked about a month or so ago, this is more of an art than a science. So whatever the committee chooses from here is perfectly okay with us. In terms of a process, I think we need to ultimately, finalize some sort of document as quickly as possible. And then our recommendation would be to have the Inspector General do kind of a self-evaluation, present it to the committee well in advance of the date that you establish. That will give you something to work from and to be able to compare your own thoughts accordingly. So, Leilani, would you like to add anything?
No,
Leilani is a person of very few words, obviously. She speaks more from her work product. So,
Could you just clarify who will complete this?
Who will come?
To whom does this go for
Well-
their check marks?
To you all.
Okay, so it does not go further than the committee,
Not as far as we're concerned.
just so we understood. I was just going to start at the left and move forward. Mr. Arenberg, would you have any questions, comments? Ms. Howitt?
I reviewed the work, and I thank you very much, given how we were sort of floundering around. I thought this was great. My question really, I mean, to me, it covered everything. There may be, folks with some specific thoughts about it, but I thought it was very thorough. I liked the various dimensions. The questions I do have is sort of how will we gather the information to answer the questions? Because as I'm going through it, I'm thinking, ooh, I haven't any idea about that. And where to reach out to for input, whether to do it individually or do it as a group, or, you know, those were sort of the questions where I went with it. But going through it, I thought it really sort of covered a lot of the issues that I think, you know, we need to look at for the evaluation.
Thank you. Let the record show that Commissioner Archer has joined the dais. Welcome.
Madam Chair?
Take a moment.
I'm voiceless.
Oh, I'm sitting in the wrong chair? Okay, so
Oh,
this is, that's better. Now that Commissioner Archer has joined us, let me just take one moment to ask for comments or corrections or approval of the minutes of our workshop of August 26th. We are not doing the minutes of the regular biannual Inspector General Committee meeting. We're just doing the workshop minutes. So if you've had a moment to review them, are there any corrections or comments on them? I would like to correct on page 8. At least it was page 8 when I looked at it. It may not be anymore. Maybe it was 6. Yes, it was page 6, just under the motion to approve. My title is not vice mayor, so we should go back to being vice chair.
Good catch.
Otherwise, I want the salary that goes with it.
That would be 0.
Any other comments, corrections? May I have a motion? Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Archer, motion by Committee Member Howitt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Merriman.
Just wanted to expand a little bit on my opening comments, and I think it goes to Ms. Howitt's point. One of the things that the committee can consider is for each of you to meet individually with the Inspector General to get insight as to, I mean, you can do that in any form before or after. I would recommend you do it after the self-evaluation, so you have some opportunity to have some dialogue and some, maybe some drilling down into some of the information. So that's another thing you can think about.
Self-evaluation?
So just to recap, Mr. Merriman and Ms. Yan suggested that this is an instrument which the committee members will use. It will also include the IG self-evaluation, and Ms. Howitt has just asked how we do it. So I think combining those two would be that Mr. Merriman suggests that we meet after we have the Inspector General's self-evaluation. I've also asked to have passed out something the Inspector General provided to us via email, just in case we needed it, which was her strategic plan presented in April, because I think that it suggests some questions we might ask. I think individually we will have different areas of focus. So together we should But your question about how we do it, do we get together and have a joint entity, is still up for comment.
I'm sorry, I don't see the self-evaluation information.
It's not here yet.
Oh.
We're just discussing its necessity of.
Evaluation's in your packet, and the blue thing has got Brad's email on the front.
Well,
that
it would
email.
be, it would be, Commissioner Archer, if I may, Madam Chair, what we were talking about is, as part of the process, have the Inspector General do an evaluation of herself first, and then present it to the committee, and then you can take whatever process you want after that, either individual meetings or come back and what have you.
Using the same form.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I have some comments.
Okay, so we were just going from the left. So Committee Member Kreidel, we're trying not to be commissioners here. My apologies.
My first comment would be that I did indeed spend some time at the IG's office last week. I guess it was a couple of hours, and I met, for the most part, all of the available staff.
Move that, if you could move it. There we go, the channel 20.
I met all of the available staff. There were a couple who escaped. And and I got to drill down into the strategic plan and into some of the performance statistics, and spent a fair amount of time with the metrics that are reported on the website. And I personally think that every member of the committee should do this. Relative to the evaluation form, it's not terribly dissimilar from a performance evaluation form you would see in most enterprises or other entity. I'm grateful that it has a very limited sliding scale. It's only 1 to 3 as opposed to 1 to 18. And the only comment that I would make is, and not knowing what the strategic plan was for the previous fiscal year, but looking at this strategic plan for the next, through 2016, it would seem to me that the specific goals that, or objectives that are set out, should be part of this evaluation. There are some of these objectives that really lend themselves to easily measurable metrics, whether it's turnaround time from an inquiry to closing a case, so that I think those are easily data mineable at the IG's level, and it would help measure the performance of the department overall and the members individually.
Thank you. Commissioner Archer.
Yes.
Member Archer.
Is my mic on? Okay. I guess it's my hearing that's off. I concur. I would like to see the goals and objectives included, and in fact, I have put forth a little schedule in my own mind to try and understand what's going on, because it can get kind of, but I would like to see the IG perform a self-evaluation using whatever form we come up with. But in addition to that, I would also like the IG to include some statistics on and some information that relate to management review information, such as a listing of her goals and objectives attained annually for the past contract period and totally for the entire contract period. What has been satisfactorily completed and what is ongoing, just so we have some concept of where we are in a point in time. I'd also like to see some goals and objectives for the upcoming contract period, both annually and for the totally new contract period. And again, I think the goals and objectives should be quantitative and measurable. I'd also like to assess what percent employee turnover we've had for the last 3 years as part of a managerial oversight. And I'd like to know the percent of employee turnover overall to date, and what are the total number of terminations and what are the total number of resignations, just so we have a snapshot in time. With those additions, I think we have a full picture in order to review the contract and determine what we could do in terms of constructive oversight for the future, and whether or not we want to renew the contract. I'm sure we will, but I think it's important criteria that we consider while we do the overall review. I'd also like to see us have some public comments in general, so that all of the comments would have the name and address of the author, so that they could not be anonymous. I think that's poo-poo. And I would like very much if it could possibly be HR that coordinates this, because this is a monumental bunch of paper. Someone has to be a receptor for it, and we have no real staff. So if they could assemble the IGs, reviews, the public comments, and each of us would then bring our own comments to the meeting. We'd have a general discussion with minutes thereof and a conclusion. That's how I see the performance going. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Committee Member Gallo.
Good morning. Reviewed your work and thought it was pretty good. Only question I have a couple questions on it. First of all, if I fill this...
Commissioner, could you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
No. If this is filled out by one of our committee members, does it become public record, or do we get to keep it ourselves?
No, it would become public record.
Okay, so we have to make sure what we put in here is what we want the world to hear.
Yes.
Okay. Why do we only have a pass-fail analysis and not something in between, like, okay, but could do better? I mean, I remember getting those all the time when I was in private industry.
Yeah.
If it may, we talked about that, and again, going back to the, it's an art, not a science. There's lots of ways to do it. When we've done performance evaluations in the past in the county, we've used a 0 to 5 scale.
Yeah.
We've used a 0 to 3. I think that when you all were talking about, since you don't have that direct one-to-one supervisory employee relationship, it becomes harder to have quantifiable and qualifiable type ratings. You're going to be, and some of you haven't been around for the full duration, so again, we can do it any way you want. We're trying to make it so that you can get input from the IG. If you want to get input from the community, you'll have your own input. You'll have public input at the meeting. And we kind of thought this was a good way to accomplish all those without, since you don't have that direct daily one-to-one managerial employee type relationship, which is the norm when you're doing a performance review.
Okay. All right. Because, all right. And the other, just to make sure to follow up on Ms. Archer's comments, obviously we're going to have additional gatherings, meetings in which we address this. If I understand your suggestion, the first one would be the self-evaluation. And I know we have a packet here. I haven't had a chance to review it because I just saw it this morning. But there's probably inclusive in this is in the self-evaluation. I assume we're also going to have a meeting where the Inspector General can give us a follow-up on her self-evaluation, and we could inquire from her any follow-up. Would make sense, right?
Sure.
And then we would have another meeting where we would have public comment. And I guess this before all of us would be, do we want to make a final determination at that time, or do we want to go back, reflect, fill out our forms, and come back and discuss it among ourselves on a third hearing? And that would be, that's the only question. I think we're at that point now where we can start identifying what meetings we need to have and scheduling those so we can get to some conclusion well before the December 26th. And so, thank you.
Can we discuss it amongst ourselves? We'd have to have another meeting.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So we should,
Okay.
I think if I understand what we're talking about so far, my suggestion would be self-evaluation meeting, we inquire, end of meeting. Public comment meeting, we go back, we fill out our own forms, come back, and then the third meeting would be where we discuss our performance forms and make a determination, yea or nay, as to whether or not to renew it. That would be, if I understand what you're asking for and what they proposed, I think we could do it in 3 meetings, and I think this criteria that's been proposed is adequate, unless someone wants to add a third or fourth category of meets expectations but needs improvement or something of that nature. Because it only is pass or fail, or I have no idea. So those are only my comments.
So,
I have a couple of comments.
Oh, okay, go.
so thank you again for putting this together. It's very helpful to try and see how best to do this. And I see that you have a narrative section in every section so that, where there's specific yay or nays, we can, so someone could meet expectations but be superlative, or meet expectations and not be superlative. So those narratives, I think, are going to be very important. I know the urge to quantify, is almost imperative in what we're doing, but let us not lose sight of the fact that this is a human endeavor. I did have a question specifically about page 4 of the set of questions. The second item strikes me as, having a very odd tone. It says operates with self-control. Could you explain to me what that means?
That came from the Palm Beach County Office of Inspector General of core values. It's a statement that's contained within the core values.
Could you help me out and pinpoint that?
I actually have to.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of it by any chance?
It's under the section called professionalism. We maintain self-control and are governed by standards and a code of ethics. We ensure a high quality of service and conduct ourselves with honor and integrity. So it's from the professionalism and core value on the IG website.
So just as an emendation, and so it's clearer, the thing that really is the guideline there is follows a code of ethics?
Yeah, it's a code of ethics
Okay.
core value.
So would this question be better phrased to
by itself, it kinda,
to say, follows the code of ethics?
which I think we have somewhere else.
But that's two more down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we just take that one out.
We could say following code of, including self-control and some of the other elements that maybe
Or just
some.
including the IG values.
Okay.
Okay, follows,
I mean, to me, what this implies is that it's performance with objectivity more than anything else. I think that self-control is an interpretive term, but beyond that concept, I think that it connotes objectivity and certainly a not applying emotions to the execution of the position.
We can work on the
Yeah, because
wording
it
on-
looks now like it says she doesn't spit on anybody. I mean, and that's kind of.
I was thinking slamming
Well, we
doors.
don't know
but-
that has an
If it
Okay.
may, please, maybe, I honestly think what I
There's
interpret.
civility, yeah.
Well, that may be true, but I think it's also that does her office have adequate internal controls to make sure that they comply with they have their own way of making sure they comply with their own professional standards. In other words, not self-control.
You meant
She-
self-government, not restraint. So it's an unfortunate choice of, so if we
When you read it in
could,
its context, it's. the
yeah, if
same.
we could make that mean what it
Sure.
should mean.
We can do that.
What we'd like it to mean.
Well, something that's a little less jarring would
Yes.
make me happy.
That's a good point.
But we do hope that she doesn't spit on people.
Well, indeed. So here's what I have gleaned from the commissioner's comments, and what I want to do is try and make this move into some sort of conclusory language if we're ready. I'm not pushing us to be ready, but we're trying to do too many things at once, I think. So one of the things we have to do is decide whether to renew the Inspector General by December some number. Another thing that we're tasked with to do as a committee always, and every 6 months, meet about general management oversight, things we'd like to see or things we'd like to see less of, that sort of thing, general guidance to be helpful. So I don't want to make this instrument do both of those things and kind of muddy what this is in fact supposed to be doing. So we have a clear task before us that has a certain deadline. One would hope the Inspector General's office is going to improve daily and weekly and monthly and forever, and we can help with that in our, oversight role. But this particular thing that we have to do today is come up with a decision process for either renewing or not renewing an Inspector General, a sitting Inspector General, whoever that might be. My guess is this sort of thing will become also the model for how we evaluate whether we will retain or not retain an executive director of the Commission on Ethics, for example. Another question that we have not come to, but is not this committee's issue. But so this is going to be a model for that process. So if I heard correctly, step one is the group that will do the evaluating is this committee. First, they will receive from General Steckler a narrative that includes an evaluation of what she intended to do, how she intended to do it when she came, how she has achieved or not achieved those goals, what sorts of environment she has created, in other words, a fairly detailed narrative of the specifics relative to this instrument. Okay, not every possible thing, but that address the questions that we are going to have to evaluate. And so we'll call that the self-evaluation. So it includes goals and objectives. It includes all of the things that we said. So that's part.
I would just
Go ahead.
add that a narrative is great, but it's very difficult to pull items out of. So I have no objection to a narrative, but I'd also like to see some.
Having seen the Inspector
quantitative.
General's reports and charts and pies and columns, and I'm sure it'll be, I use the narrative to just mean something that she produces with whatever format.
If I may, you could probably just track the form, keep it in the
Indeed.
don't necessarily do the line by line, but the various categories.
And with metrics and with
Right.
whatever other materials have already been presented over the 4 years, 3.5 years that you have reported to us. So all of that material is there, and we're just asking you, because we don't have time to sift it out of the report. So I'm just calling that self-evaluation as a way to identify the thing that General Steckler has to do before the next thing that we do. Is that a fair statement? Okay.
You're not going to address the management issues?
My hope is that that's part of what we do as the Inspector General Committee as we meet every 6 months.
Okay, but there are other items involved, as you can indicate. I think,
So just for sake of getting through this, and then we'll come back to specifics.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay. So step one, we have a revised evaluation template fairly quickly, and Inspector General does this reporting of something. Step two, committee member Kreidel suggested that we individually meet with or contact or be in touch with the Inspector General to discuss whatever aspects we wish to drill down, get more information, find out, that sort of thing. So individually, we will find out things that matter to us, and we will bring them back to the rest of the group. My guess is we're not all going to ask the same questions, so it might be that your questions get answered in that way. It might, we may come up with something else. But so there's narrative or report, and there's drilling down. If we could get to agreement on those things before we get to the question of public comments, I think that would be helpful, because we don't have a process for that. So what are folks thinking so far with just that 3 pieces getting to the next meeting where we come back and talk about? Okay. So, go ahead. I'll
Is
get
our
to
next-
public comments now, but I wanted to just see.
No,
if
I think
you
the
were-
first step would be, first of all, we have to adopt this performance.
Yes.
And I believe Ms. Archer has raised an issue as to it does not include her management of personnel in her office, and she wants that to be.
I understand that,
this.
and so those would be questions that individual
And an
committee
outline of
members
goals
could
and
ask.
objections and if they've
Well,
met or.
yes, and those were all part of the narrative.
Yeah.
So if you want specific
Well-
questions about how did you manage this particular case, or that sort of thing, I think that's an individual committee member interaction, and they bring that back to the larger committee.
But I think if we're going to utilize a format, or a draft, what do you call this document again? I'm going with blank.
It's a contract renewal discussion document.
Okay. Then I think the purpose of it is to identify the criteria we're using to make a decision. There is no reference made to, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but there's no reference made to how she manages her office and in a day-to-day manner.
How would you determine that, other than having a conversation?
Well, but the point is, if we're going to make it part of our criteria in renewing the contract, it should be part of our checklist so that we have some sort of objective criteria to follow, I would think is what the goal of the checklist is. I was reading through here, and I don't see anything where I would make a comment about her relationship
Exactly.
with employees. And that's why I understand Ms. Archer's
Right.
raised that issue. I'm just,
And while there are a lot of information about goals and objectives, I'd like to see a matrix, because I don't want to go
Matrix
through
is what
20
it's looking
pounds
for.
of stuff.
okay.
I'd
And I
like to
think-
see,
I
this
think
is the
we can-
goal, did we meet it, did we not? Is
I
it
think
ongoing?
the Inspector General understands that her goal is to communicate very succinctly in this narrative.
But my point being that the whole purpose of having a matrix or document that we follow is so that we all agree that this is the criteria we're using to make this determination.
Is this
How-
not the one that you want to use? That's what I'm trying to.
I'm okay with it, but Ms. Archer raised an issue about including additional information.
Yes.
So before we go forward on self-evaluation, next meetings, what have you, I think we need to first identify the criteria, which is what we've been doing for, I think, 3 meetings. What criteria should be included in this document? Ms. Archer has raised the issue of adding her management of her office, and I just think we need to address that, because I think the first step is this document adequate? If so, then let's go to the next step, which would be
So let's ask
Evaluation.
Mr. Merriman to what extent this document could or might or should or cannot measure in some fashion management of the office.
Well, that specific topic was not necessarily within the things that we talked about, drawing from the ordinance. They're a kind of general. You're talking now general management type issues, which we certainly can incorporate another section into this document if the committee so chooses.
Please. Ms. Howitt.
In looking, I understand the concerns, although I have, I guess, mixed thoughts about it in terms of the extent to which we really are overseeing management.
Given
But-
independence
Right.
concerns, yes.
Sorry, and looking at is this the contract? I do note in the, let's see, Inspector General contract deliverables. And I think there was an effort to address this in the first section with the directives under the employees
Right.
removes OIG staff.
Establishes personnel, right.
The actual provision, and so if we wanted to broaden it to some degree, is the Inspector General shall have the power to appoint, employ, and remove such assistants, employees, and personnel, and establish personnel procedures as deemed necessary for the efficient and effective administration of the activities of the Office of the Attorney General. So if we incorporate a little bit of that language, we could have a yes, no, and then also be able to address that in the narrative. And then I think the specific questions, such as turnover, might be a concern of one person. We can find that information out or ask those questions. But
I'd
something
want
that-
to know how turnover is interpreted. So, for example, if someone left the Inspector General's office and got a better job, I would say that was a good thing for the Inspector General, shows training, shows professional development. If they left because they violated the Code of Ethics, that would also be a good thing. So, in other words, I'm afraid that we're looking at a number and making it do stuff that it can't do.
Well, just to finish, I think we're all going to have our own sort of things that are important to us. I don't know that we can get consensus on all agreeing as to what is most important. So I think what's important is that there's sufficient language so that if somebody is concerned about turnover, that question can be asked. If somebody isn't, we don't ask it. But I just think we could maybe, if we're sort of drilling down into specifics under the directives, maybe just add, really we could maybe combine the first
we
two.
We can absolutely do that.
And
then,
add
of
something.
course, you can deal with it in the narrative for the
Right.
things that are important
Right.
to you.
Right.
Because
And there's
you-
also the accreditation report, which speaks to that issue.
Because you are 100% correct. One person's turnover is a good thing, and another one's is a
Yeah,
bad
and I'm not saying that a
In other-
particular commissioner couldn't drill that down with the Inspector General, but my hope was that we could take some instrument, whatever it was, and I'm happy to amend this, but then have individual committee members follow their, particular concerns directly with the Inspector General and then report back to this group, rather than try to create more sets of questions around any particular thing, given that this comes out of the contract, the ordinance, et cetera. So I'm hoping we can find a framework that's sort of like that, which gets both things in.
All I was suggesting was that in addition to doing the review that we have, which is yes, no, pass, fail, that we ask the IG for specific information on goals and objectives and turnover, because they're part of management skills. And that's all. I'm not asking to do a whole matrix on, 14 pages with yes and no
Yeah,
answers.
and
I'm just asking for input from her.
Indeed. So what I'm trying to understand is, are you satisfied with these questions as long as the Inspector General reports the outline of the information that you're interested in? Or is this, as Commissioner Gallo suggests, something that means that the instrument has to be changed?
Gallo?
I think the suggestion of Ms. Howell is excellent. It covers the issue. All I say is that I think we ought to have an objective criteria that we employ all across the board. How we individually identify that is going to be to the individual committee member. And so since the issue was raised, that should be addressed in the matrix. I think Ms. Howitt's modification is excellent. And if we were to make a motion to accept the matrix as presented with that amendment, I think that would be inappropriate. I think from what I hear, I think we're all kind of in agreement, and that would be passed, and then we can go to the next step, which is when are we going to have our self-evaluation. So that's what's my suggestion.
So, good. So that means there are two questions that Mr. Merriman is going to revise. So it'll be something on the order of, in the directives on first page,
Yes.
where you will,
We will incorporate
Okay.
the changes to have a little bit of a broader.
I have one other addition that I think might be valuable in terms of evaluating management skills, and that would be allocation of costs, allocation of funds. What % of funds were spent on projects? What % of funds were spent of the overall budget? What were spent on administration? What was spent on the lawsuit? We have no idea, and it would give us some understanding of how funds are allocated.
I would respond that considers relative costs and benefits in planning and conducting activities, and page 5, and that area of, would be, again, this matrix is for us to identify areas of evaluation, facts, data that you wish to, individual committee members
Okay.
want to incorporate. So the goal today is to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music of what areas we want to evaluate. So we're all in this, and I think with the changes we've addressed. I think that is covered by some other parts
Okay.
of the matrix.
I'd like to interject something, ask something, and maybe say something. I'm not sure in which order. What I've heard here is that management of the agency is something that the committee is required to look at twice a year. Is that correct?
It's perhaps, that would be overstating it somewhat. The Inspector General is an independent entity. We do not, we advise the Inspector General as to issues that we see or aspects that we think, deserve more attention. But at the end of the day, the Inspector General is an independent entity. So at most, we are advisory.
But you said there's a
Although we have
meeting
the
twice
power.
a year, every
Yes,
6 months.
Every 6 months.
What's the purpose of that meeting?
That is the Inspector General Committee, and the purpose of that is for the Inspector General to tell us what she's been doing and what her, perspectives are on how things are going, and we ask questions and generally conduct a public meeting for the purpose of communicating that. We ask questions and challenge her.
So it would seem to me that that is a more appropriate venue to get into specific metrics such as turnover. That said, it is difficult to review from a management performance perspective performance or execution if you're not there, if you cannot observe it. Otherwise, you're dealing with hearsay, and that is a difficult challenge. And I don't know that when you're looking at a contract which is at 50,000 feet and you're looking at performance which is 10,000 feet and on the runway, that to renew a contract should be focused on anything other than the terms of the contract and the ordinance that supports the contract. I think everything else is for this twice a year, meeting and review of what's really going on. And that's my perspective.
Well, the contract does say that appropriate managerial efforts are a part of her responsibilities. So all I'm saying is that we need to, at least at contract renewal, look over those responsibilities and have an overall, plus, minus kind of
Then it should
evaluation.
be everything, not just turnover. I mean, that seems to be a focus.
Well, we don't run her office.
Got it.
The IG does.
Mm-hmm.
All we're looking at is what are the measurable facts that we can say that there is an issue or there isn't an issue. If everything's fine, then there's no problem. If there is an issue, then we want to say, okay, what was this issue? We're not looking for hearsay. We're looking for input from the IG. There's no hearsay.
But there are numerous issues which could be anywhere from turnaround time on new matters.
Well, that's for her to give us input on. No
When?
problem.
Should it be part of the evaluation?
I'm saying that I want it included in part of the evaluation, but I would like to see her self-evaluation of those items for us to discuss. Because I'm not going to go to her office and count anything.
Oh, I understand that. But my understanding also is that her self-evaluation is going to be to complete the same form that we would.
Plus, I'm asking for some additional information. And I'm not asking for names, addresses, and phone numbers. I'm asking for general numbers.
Okay.
Okay. Is there, so the first three pieces seem identifiable to me. Approve an instrument, which we can do today, subject to the information or the concerns that you've heard. The second thing is to, we've asked the Inspector General to provide specifics in response to this instrument. If there's a better name for the document than self-evaluation, I'm happy to use it. I promise not to use narrative ever again. And then to that, she will attach metrics and various things from the report, goals and objectives, and we have the strategic plan going forward. So, and then that would bring us to a meeting at which, and then committee members would meet individually or discuss individually with the Inspector General, and then we would come back together and share that process. Is that essentially what?
Yes. I think the first thing we do is adopt this metrics or this checklist. Then we set a meeting for Ms. Steckler to come in and do her self-evaluation. Both, I assume she's going to fill out the form and then make a presentation. My line, is that better? Okay.
Does that require a meeting? Could we just have that?
Well, I think if she's going to, I would suggest that she make a presentation. I mean, trust me, I'm not interested in
Okay.
just coming in for another meeting, but I think it's in all due fairness to all parties involved, if there's questions that need to be followed up on, she has a right to respond to those, and we have a right to ask those questions. Or we ought to have. I don't think the right's the correct word, but it would be beneficial. And then the next meeting after that would be public comment.
Okay.
And then the final meeting would be where we've all prepared our own checklist, our own conclusions, come in and have a discussion and make the determination. So I proposed 3 additional meetings, but the first things first. Let's make sure we have the criteria. So if I understand correctly, page 4 of 8 is one of the suggested corrections, where it says operates with self-control. We're going to modify that terminology to be self-governing or the nature of that nature. And page 1 of 8, the first 1 or 2 criteria is going to be added to management of the firm. If I may, Chairman, Doctor, if I may, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the matrix as provided with those 2 amendments. I think that would be our first step, and I'd like to make that motion.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we have a motion by Commissioner Gallo to accept this with the 2 changes that we've discussed as the basic renewal discussion document. Is there a second? Second from Committee Member Kreidel. Any further discussion?
Just one. I'm thinking about whether we need another column. And I understand our 6-month meeting is different than this meeting, but if we do have some oversight responsibilities, should we have a sort of meets expectations but could use improvement?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I was too. I was, when I first saw the matrix, I was happy with it, but I felt constrained.
And, frankly, from the IG's perspective, I don't want this to be sort of a adversarial process in any respect. I would like it to be that would be information you would also want. Is, yes, I'm doing what I should be doing, but there's a perspective that says this is something maybe that we can improve on. But that's my only comment.
So
on it.
again, I just want to caution us that this is the renewal, not the oversight meeting. And this document is, so I think, one, we could do it that way, or we could use the narrative section on this to put our comments in that say, yes, meets expectations, but I would have preferred to see blah, or something like that.
Just out of curiosity, I'm a manager. I've taught management in college and all sorts of other gobbledygook.
Microphone, sorry.
Anytime I would see does not meet expectation, that immediately tells me there's something that needs improvement, just at its core. It would seem to be a redundant criteria. Because if something's not meeting our expectation, are you willing to settle? Or is the objective to move it, to move that needle to meet expectation in the next review?
We could change the title of that column to needs improvement instead of does not meet.
The only, and to be honest with you, I'm still on the fence both ways, but we are a public committee, and I think we have to renew the contract, but I don't think it would harm us to tell the community, yeah, we renewed it, but we do recognize certain areas and that we're asking the Inspector General in renewal to improve on these matters. And so we do have, I think, though we don't have an obligation, it's always best to let the community know why we're doing things, what we're doing, that we're not in a vacuum and leaves speculation out of the. So when I looked at this originally, I thought the needs improvement was an appropriate addition, but it wasn't what was requested of us last meeting, which is why it was included. I made the motion. I'm willing to amend it to include the latter one. But I recognize that we don't want to be micromanaging the Inspector General. I also recognize we don't want to insert what's unnecessary in our evaluation. But we do only meet most of the time we only meet twice a year. And so putting out what we're supposed to.
And we have not been shy about saying what needs improvement.
Right, so.
So we meet in February for the management, quote-unquote, part of the meeting.
Well, hopefully we won't have to meet this many times in the future because we're struggling with paperwork right now.
So at present, we have a motion and a second, and we're still discussing. What is the will of the committee?
I'd be glad to move that we change the column in the matrix from does not meet expectations to needs improvement.
Since I'm the person who made the motion, I'll make such a motion.
Okay.
If I'm permitted. Is it already
Go
permitted?
ahead, make it. Yeah.
I'm trying to think about the rules. Do we have to?
Please.
Modify your
Yeah,
motion.
we'll make progress this way.
Okay. Then if everyone agrees, I'll amend the motion procedurally. I'm not saying you have to agree with my motion. If you all agree I can procedurally amend it, I'll amend it to include, I think my original motion was we accept the matrix as presented with the exception of modifying page 1 of 4 and 8, and 1 of 8 and 4 of 8, as we discussed previously, and add a fourth column, which would be.
That's different from what Commissioner Archer just said.
I said,
Well, there's 3 columns now.
yeah.
But did you hear what Commissioner Archer offered?
I said, let's not say does not meet expectations. Let's say needs improvement.
Oh, well, that's not, I wouldn't make that motion. I'd make the motion there should be an additional column.
All right, so now we are at a confusing spot because we
That's
have
right.
too many things going on. So would you like to withdraw your original motion or amend it? You're amending it to make a fourth column. Is that correct, Commissioner Gallo?
That was my intentions, yes.
Okay. Is there a second for making a fourth column?
I'll second that.
Ms. Howitt seconds. Okay. So the motion on the table is to adopt this instrument with the 2 changes on pages 1 and 4 and add a fourth column that says needs improvement. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So
Madam Chair, I want to be recorded as no. Oh, sorry. I'm going to record as no because I think that's unnecessarily redundant to have 2 columns that pretty much say the same thing.
So we have Fiore and Arenberg say no.
Well, I'll say no then, too.
Motion fails. Madam Clerk, are you okay on the voting? We have Arenberg, Archer, and Fiore saying no. We have Kreidel, Howitt, and Gallo saying yes.
Yes, thank you. I just would ask that people keep the microphones closer to their mouths, please. Thank you.
And leave them on. Okay, so we need a new motion.
Okay, I'll make an attempt. I move that we approve the matrix with the corrections on page 1 of 8 and on page 4 of 8, and to change the middle column on the matrix from does not meet expectations to needs improvement.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Archer to amend the instrument to clarify the wording on pages 1 and pages 4, and to change the middle column from does not meet expectation to needs improvement. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Committee Member Arenberg. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Nay, I mean.
Nay. We have Commissioner Gallo votes no. All others vote yes. Motion carries. Okay. Mr. Merriman,
Got it.
when can you have this?
Tomorrow.
Okay. So this is approved, and we'll have a new version soon. The Inspector General can start her work. So the second phase of this is that the Inspector General writes a report. The suggestion was that you also present it. Do you have some thoughts about that?
My concern is that I really would like to write it and then you all come visit, because I really think in order to be able to really encapsulate every individual's questions, you need to come to the office. After that, whether it's presented or whether you just do it in the same form of a public forum, it doesn't really, I have no way, one way or the other, but I really think it's important that each of you come to the office, because I need to also understand your expectations, because I'm hearing different things. So I can certainly go forward and follow this template, but I think it's critical that you all come individually to come to the office and meet with me and staff and see what we've set up, and then we go forward for another public after that hearing.
Commissioners, what are your thoughts? Committee members, I'm sorry. Ms. Howen.
I think that's fine. I am wondering, though, whether we should have an opportunity to ask questions in a public forum, both for our benefit. I'd like to hear your questions. There might be things I don't think of that you think to ask. And, once again, not to put you on the spot, but just to ask some questions to see, is that something of interest versus the way I see it, if we all individually go and ask our questions, then we come back and have a meeting, and then I'm saying, well, she told me blah, 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 when you ask the question, or, something. So, I'm wondering about an opportunity to have sort of a forum where both, and maybe others come that we ask questions of, for example, and, does public comments, is that going to include public officials who have had things to say, or is that an opportunity to ask questions of them? We know Mr. Weissman has some thoughts about things. I'd be interested in a public opportunity to ask him questions about concerns he's expressed. I think I said before, I'd be interested in asking, and I know this gets everybody all uptight, but asking some of the agencies that have been audited, asking them to come so that we can ask specific questions. If they want to make comments, fine, but just, some of these questions I feel like I have to ask somebody who has been involved in an investigation. And so I'd like the opportunity to ask them to come so that we can ask specific questions of them. And whether we combine that with somebody said a meeting on a public comments. I thought we were going to try and do it somehow on the internet, but if we're going to have a meeting where we invite people to come and comment, that's fine. Whether we combine those two or not, I don't have any real thoughts about.
The concerns I have is all the factors we consider should be factors we considered here on the dais. So although I will concur with that Steckler's suggestions that we review her self-evaluation in written form, meet with her at office and ask specific questions, I think that the nature of this committee is such that our decision-making process and all factors therein should be on this dais. So I think we should have a hearing, a meeting, a public meeting where those issues are addressed, so everyone knows what we're thinking about.
I concur.
Okay, so the sense of the committee is that, sorry, did you want to?
Well, if I may.
Please.
I think what we're hearing is probably a pretty good process in terms of a structure. Do a self-evaluation, meet with the Inspector General individually if you want. I don't think, my opinion is if you don't feel like you need to do that, then you certainly don't have to. And then come back in a public meeting with both the public having input and then the committee having discussions and questions of the IG based on the self-evaluation, the public comment, other comments that you may have, and just kind of wrap that up in one big meeting, and then the final meeting being the recommendation. Now, the only thing that's still on the table is this issue of public comment. There's at least two ways to do that. One is to have a meeting and invite everybody who wants to come and make their comment. We talked 6-8 months ago about doing some sort of internet survey, and that could still be done, but that's a whole nother process.
So before we get to any kind of specific unsolicited public comment on the internet, can we just think about the process that Ms. Howitt outlined? So that would be the Inspector General submits her report. We do or do not visit her, talk to her, have something to do with her. I would highly recommend that. I do not think you can appreciate what she has accomplished without seeing the office operation. And so, again, because this is a human operation, a set of numbers is not going to give you the whole thing, but we'll leave that up to individuals. Then it is suggested that we come back in a public meeting. We invite anyone who wants to come, including every agency that's been audited or particular ones. In other words, well, if we're going to issue an invitation,
I guess we should invite all.
Well, we would typically do just a public notice.
Just a public notice, okay.
And identify what's on the agenda, and then people
Okay.
can take it from there, whether or
Okay.
not they want to.
As to particular public officials, since Mr. Weissman was mentioned, I'll, have my say about that. I think it's, it was a poor mode to say, I have complaints, the Inspector General shouldn't be renewed, and I'll tell you at a later date why I think that. I just think that was atrocious in terms of professionalism. So I'm happy to hear from Mr. Weissman, but I don't want to hear anything like that ever again. I want to hear specifics and a professional report, not name-calling. So I'm happy to have whoever officials want to come, but I was offended by that. So there'll be a public meeting. Whoever can come and wants to say whatever they want to say. Yeah.
Well, I would like to specifically invite, because it's not just to give them an opportunity to say, I want to ask questions.
Who would you like? So you'll give.
So I'm thinking maybe all the agencies, we send, something that says we're having this meeting, we're interested in your input as
Would you like it to be investigated or audited or commented?
What we can
I
do
don't
is
know.
we can send a notice to every agency that the IG office has jurisdiction over to let them know that this meeting's going to occur.
Is that?
I mean, I'm hoping somebody will show up so I can have my questions
Somebody will show up.
answered.
So
And not just the disgruntled ones. I mean, I kind of
It'd
want
be
folks
terrible to have a
to
party and
know
nobody
that
show.
we're interested and we have questions
Right.
about their experience.
Okay.
And so that's why I want
So
it
that
to
would
be
be
clear.
anyone who the Inspector General has issued a report to?
Has jurisdiction over.
Anyone they have jurisdiction over. That would be every citizen in Palm Beach County.
No, the
Every
38
public official.
municipalities, all the city managers, Children's Service Council, and
Okay.
Solid Waste Authority, which, I would hope they would come.
Right.
Okay, so that, okay. So is that, and we schedule a meeting to do that and include a public meeting, and so there's a general invitation and a general citizens notice, right?
Well, we do there'll be a general meeting notice,
Okay.
which goes on the county meeting list, which is on everybody's website.
So anyone who wants to say
Absolutely.
anything
And
can come.
if it's the committee's will to do a specific notice to the jurisdictions that the IG covers, we can do that too.
Okay. So is that a motion, perhaps?
Sure.
I just need to move us into.
Yes.
Second.
What is the motion?
That's what, I'm going to repeat it now. So the motion is by Ms. Howitt and seconded by Commissioner Archer to receive the Inspector General's report and to have a meeting at which agencies and citizens and public officials can come and give feedback about the Inspector General. And we can ask them questions, ask the Inspector General questions.
Right.
So it would be a meeting for the purpose of discussing all various other inputs so that we can complete our evaluation. Mr. Merriman.
And in between those two, if the committee members individually want to meet with the IG, they can do that.
Indeed. Is that a fair statement? Go ahead.
Yes, and presumably at that meeting would be the place. I mean, a simple example of my concern is I need to ask Mr. Ehrenberg about the question with regards to communicating with him. I'm not allowed to ask him in any other forum but this. So I'm assuming
Sure.
that would be the forum where we ask some of those questions. And I guess, we ought to invite the federal prosecutor or whatever. Isn't there something about communicating with the feds? There was something.
For subpoena.
Okay. can I
So if
ask
there
you-
is anybody who you have dealt with, to invite them?
If I understand what the motion is supposed to incorporate, or I understood it to be incorporate, is that where to ask, where's to schedule another public meeting where we invite comment from all public entities, including citizens and those entities under the jurisdiction of the Inspector General, to provide us input as to their thoughts on her performance of her contract. At said meeting, we're also going to allow ourselves to inquire and follow up with Inspector General Steckler about her self-evaluation and if we had any visits with her in her office. And that is just really a fact-gathering meeting where then we'll take all that information, digest it, come back with a filled-out matrix of our own, and discuss that at a subsequent
Another
meeting.
meeting, correct.
I get that right?
That's perfect.
Okay.
I'm all for it. Thank you.
That's a full day.
And,
So-
and you probably, when you have that meeting, you can take the public comment as a group first, and then the jurisdictions second, or vice versa, just to keep them
Right.
compartmentalized in terms of, because
Yes.
when you hear from the public, as we know, you might hear
Right.
different.
But
kinds of-
we're going to have to be, manage that carefully. So the Inspector General will have the first, I don't know, however much of that agenda, hour, half hour, whatever it is, and then some number of hours, like 3 hours for that. And then our conversations, deliberations, question and answer. So, it will be, the timekeeper will be in effect for that.
Well, we're talking about 4 sections now. The IG has some discussion, we have general public input, we have to have the jurisdictional input, and then we want to have discussion. So that's 4 sections.
Discussion we should have. Our general discussion should be a subsequent meeting, not at that meeting.
Well,
Because-
I meant questions and answers. In other words, we might want to ask people questions. So that's, in other words, that was the gist of your motion, was we need a chance to
Okay.
kind
Yes.
of work with the people who are coming to comment.
Yes.
Not just have comments. Okay,
Yes.
if I understood correctly.
And I would just, not as part of the motion, I know you want to get this motion done, but I'm not going to let you.
We can make 2 motions.
Is
It's okay
that,
with
I
me.
don't know if it would be appropriate in the notice to publicize that what we end up agreeing to is like on the website or something to guide the comments, that these are the things we're looking for
Yes.
at, something
Yes.
along those lines.
So the suggestion here, Mr. Merriman, is that the discussion document be, formatted, beautified, and placed on the website as the
To give people
renewal.
an indication
Right.
of
Yes.
what the meeting's all
What sorts
about.
of things we are looking at and what sorts of things we would hope to have input about.
Sure.
Good.
And it could be on the Inspector General's website and the county website.
It'd be everywhere.
It could be everywhere.
It won't be on my website.
Ubiquitous overall.
So, I'm just going to say that's a mechanical aspect and not something we need a
Right.
motion about, if
Yes.
that's all right.
And could we add then that we have the discussion meeting after that?
Continuous.
No, separate meeting for us to review our thoughts, feelings.
Well, I'm trying to keep the meetings down because,
Well, Mr. Gallo-
I understand he wanted 4 meetings, and I will only say on my behalf, there's only so much time that can be devoted
Well,
to this. So,
I'm hearing
I've only clarified, I only want 2 meetings.
so if we're going to do whole day meetings, I think we ought to really work the whole day.
Yeah.
I think we're down to 2 meetings.
Oh, good.
I think the second meeting is the time we have.
Where we have to make our
discussion
decision and
make
come to a
decision.
conclusion
That's
and
the
say.
decision meeting.
Yay
Yeah.
or nay. Yes. In other words, all the inputs will have been
Yes.
produced.
At what we call the public meeting.
At the public meeting, we can go and.
And then we have a
cogitate.
decision meeting after that. Okay.
That's, I think, the most parsimonious way we can achieve this. Is
Okay,
that
now,
it?
my question is, are we getting a self-evaluation in
Well,
writing?
let's get to
or-
this motion first.
Well, that was part of the motion. First
Yes.
was
I
self-evaluation.
think we've been very clear that the self-evaluation is a written document.
Okay.
And then at the public meeting, the Inspector General will have time to answer questions about it.
Okay.
or
Good clarification.
say whatever she wants to say, if anything. Yeah, and I'm hoping that, I will write up this procedure after I look at the minutes and remind myself, because remember, this is the procedure that we're going to say is fair for everyone.
Right.
So we want it to be fair for everyone. Okay, so do I have to repeat the motion?
No.
All right, so we're going to have a giant public meeting at which we get more information from everyone, and that will help us complete our task. The motion was by Committee Member Howitt, seconded by Committee Member Archer. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Congratulations, you have a process. Now, the other question which fell out is, are we going to do any internet email survey? This was brought up, this was dropped, it was deemed to be of no particular validity. So I'm inclined to think we're going to have enough input, but
The only question I have is whether, I don't think we should do the internet. Is whether we need to schedule our next meeting such that people who work can attend. I see Mr. Gallo's
as a person
look on
who
her
works,
face.
I would appreciate that.
Well, in terms of the public, and I know that's, whether it's 4 to 8 or something like that would be the only issue about
I
it.
prefer midnight to 6 a.m.
You're the only one who prefers that.
So,
All right, so before we get to scheduling the meeting, I'm hearing no particular movement toward any further surveying or other kinds of things. So before we, wait, I'm looking for my agenda, there it is. Before we set meetings and move on, I have one comment card from Ms. Scheibel. Is there any other person who has, would you like to?
Irish Scheibel, Palm Beach Gardens. Welcome.
Is your microphone working?
No, it's not.
Here?
Hello? Yes. Irish Scheibel, Palm Beach Gardens. To Mr. Cradell, I've been involved since 2009. This illustrious committee has heard from me every time they've met, as have other folks. But I welcome you. I want to reiterate to all of the Ethics Commission and all of you on the IG Committee that we know these are volunteer positions, and we know a lot is being asked of you. The commissioners get paid, you don't, not for doing this, and so appreciate the effort to which you're going. I agree with the comments that say each of you really should meet with the IG and see meet with her after she provides the written comment, that you should go there and take the time, whether it's half an hour, whether it's 2 hours as you spent, just to really understand the environment, see the people, make it real for you. So while everyone has gotten an out on taking the time to do that, I really would strongly encourage that you do it. I believe that a lot of you have thrashed about what are you trying to achieve. Your role by ordinance is a yes or no. Do you renew the contract? And while the IG committees, certainly the evaluation and the feedback is critical, I don't think you want to put too many things into that single decision. It's up to each of you to decide what your vote is going to be and then to take a vote. As far as looking at strategy for the next 4 years, well, why should you be doing that until the February meeting, where you want to say, okay, Ms. Deckler, or whoever, if your decision was otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it in February. What are the goals for the next 4 years? That's part of deciding your criteria at that time so that you wouldn't be going through the situation you're in. Here you're developing a criteria to evaluate somebody 2 months before you have to make the decision to renew the contract. If you were putting yourself in that place or put your new executive director in that position, and think about how you would do that. You're the managers of a person, and you would evaluate them or put their criteria in front of them 2 months before you're about to make the decision. That is not a fair position. I think you have adequate information that you will get from the feedback that Ms. Steckler gives, whatever public input you seek, as well as from people who have received or interacted with the IG to make that yes or no decision, and then use as all this effort that you've been going through as a criteria to use for the next 4 years of a contract and for your executive director. Again, you're trying to do things after the fact, which is not fair to put anybody in. I'll reiterate, I do like having everybody there. I still think we had recommended through the Ethics Initiative an example of what they did in New Orleans, where they also, as part of the public meeting, said, you have 2 weeks to submit in writing, because not everyone is going to be able to come to your marathon meeting, whether you schedule it 4 to 8 or 10 to 4 or whatever, that you allow people to put in writing, not anonymously, write a letter if they want in this period. So I guess it would be before this public comment meeting and discussion meeting, you would encourage people to give them a 2-week period to provide input. And that would just be input you receive along with the rest of your packages, the rest of your discussion. And that is something, again, you are individually going to have to decide your vote. It's not a group think, it's you have to decide your own vote. I will reiterate, since not all of you have always been here, is not a popularity contest, nor are, if you think about city managers or county manager, evaluated this way. I mean, the types of public scrutiny that you're putting the IG to, are you going to do that with your executive director? Probably not, because they work directly for you. The premise is usually, and even Mr. Wiseman has said, the premise is generally a contract employee to renew unless there's cause or unless there's some reason not to renew. So I go back to the premise is to renew. You're setting a precedent, not just for executive director, but for future IGs who might want to apply for this job. So I think you keep that in mind. The contract renewal date, you said December 26th. I think having a meeting, even for you to discuss it on December 26th, is probably waiting a little late.
It'll be before that.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to have both the 2-week time period and the comments probably before Thanksgiving, if you could, just because after that things are crazy, and then your actual decision meeting could be any time before the 26th. But trying to work that out and getting any good feedback from people is going to be difficult. So anyhow, that's some of my comments. I do encourage you to be familiar with the ordinance, IG ordinance, in terms of your role. Reread that, because your role is, while the IG 6 months reports are good, your role is renew the contract or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Thank you. I would just, as a matter of fact, point out that the sample from Louisiana, they do not have a public records law such as we do, in which all of those things would have to be made public. So, the other issue that we discussed, and so from Mr. Cradell, we don't have staff for this committee. So any specific solicitation of written comment from the public would have to be handled by Mr. Merriman's office.
What is the normal protocol when a public hearing like this, where we're gathering public comment? Is there a practice where they can submit those comments in writing? And if so, how do we designate that?
Well, there really isn't any protocol, because we've never done this before.
Exactly. No other public official.
People send things to the county all the time on any subject. Sometimes letters, sometimes emails. Again, you can set it up so that the people can show up, and they have to show up, or we can build something into it to give them some period of time. If they want to send something, they can. I mean, that's committee's choice.
Yeah. I mean, we have had this conversation about 11 times. So I don't want to resurrect it unless there is a reason to.
Well, what was our decision?
That we couldn't verify identities, we did not have staff for it, and it would involve reading, much more paperwork than we were about to embark on. So our goal is to have access for folks, and if we have the public meeting at a time when they can access, I think that's what our responsibility is. Our responsibility is not to, beat the bushes looking for. We also have the responses of all the people who have received Inspector General reports and opinions to look at, which I think is a very good barometer of activity as well. So, I don't see a justification that has been presented to this committee to move forward on some sort of internet odyssey.
I wasn't necessarily thinking of an internet odyssey. I was thinking of, in our public notice, we say we are welcoming public comment to be provided to us on November 1st, 2013. If you cannot attend, you're welcome to provide a written. However, only public comment provided to us on or before November 1st, 2013 will be considered. And then if someone wants to write a letter, they can. If someone wants to appear in person, they can. But that gives them the opportunity, because it is between midnight and 6 o'clock, I have a feeling there will be a number of people who will not attend. And we don't want to give the impression we're doing it to exclude anyone. So we offer that. And that was what the public comment was, that you should include everyone who can. That was just my thought process.
I'm thinking about this, and I just think our role really is to represent the community that is, for the most part, I think, supportive, but is also the ones that are responsible for funding the IG, and we are really their only voice. And so I think it is important that there is the opportunity to comment. And so I would support something that allows people, I think we're going to get like 3 letters, but something that does allow people to write, so that there isn't that sense that we're carving out one little time that they can come in and have their say and that's it. I want it to be clear that we are, doing the important work that I think we're charged with doing, and part of that is hearing what if there's people that have something they want to say and they can't be here, that they have an opportunity to say it and for us to read it. I don't think it's going to be a lot. I think we could put something that says you need to identify yourself.
Well, I think Mr. Merriman has to validate names and addresses.
I mean, I think the weight I put on it is going to be based on sort of how, if they identify themselves, and so the issue with what weight we put on it, I think, is different. I wouldn't care about it being validated or not or whatever, as much as that they're comfortable identifying themselves.
I would suggest that we might consider having the jurisdictional meeting first, because those people are basically employed and have the ability to come at a time, I think, during business hours. I would suggest maybe 1 to 3 as a time frame, and then we could have a break and go to the bathroom and do et cetera, and then have the public meeting, say, I don't know, from 4 to 7, which would give people the opportunity to come late in the day if they wanted to get off work or after work, and then we would have provided that time. That means that we would have a little time for questions and answers, maybe up to 8 or even 8:30 if we dragged it out for that long, and then we could leave and come back with minutes from that meeting and have our discussion and decision meeting.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Motion by Commissioner Archer to have a public meeting at which we have it at various hours at which people could come. And that is
Jurisdictional first, open public second. Right. So it's late in the day.
In order to obtain public input. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Crydell. Any
Discussion?
further discussion?
Briefly, I think, is this motion supposed to include all aspects of it, including the notice of it as well? And also, does it include a period of time where we can inquire of the Inspector General to follow up from our review of her self-evaluation? And I'm reading. I got it open. I mean, okay, how's that? All right, I'm sorry.
Perhaps we could do that prior to lunch, like 10:30 to noon.
No, well,
Then
how
have
about
lunch and then come back for 1 o'clock.
how about 1 to 2, or follow up on our self? Well, I think the self-evaluation and the follow-up with the Inspector General should be after we hear all public comments, and because those are going to raise questions, I think, that we're going to want responses. So, look, I would love to do it in 20 minutes and move on, but unfortunately,
Okay,
we
so
can't. So,
you would like to have the jurisdictional, then the public, then our Q&A with the Inspector General.
I don't know if the word "like" is the way it's.
No, I'm trying to
I think that's the necessary.
I'm trying to craft a process.
Well, two things in terms of discussion on the motion. So the motion does not include any written public
No one has made that
opportunity
motion
for
yet.
written public.
No, the motion was just in terms of the public meeting.
Okay, so that'll be a separate issue.
Yeah.
And could we do it that I would like for General Steckler to have an opportunity to speak at the conclusion, if there is any follow-up. So maybe still do, the questions of her, the jurisdictional, I guess is what we're calling it, in the afternoon, have an opportunity for the public comment, and then I bet she'll hang around and we can, if we have any further questions or if there's any specific things that she would like an opportunity to address, she
You
has
can be
that
8 to 9.
at the end.
Okay, so the meeting format at the moment is General Steckler presents a modified version of her
She
metric
said no.
self-report.
No, just
I'm just, then there's the jurisdictional comment, then there's the public comment, then there's an opportunity to question General Steckler afterwards. Is that?
I would just say, I think she's going to provide us something in writing, so we
Yes.
don't need to have it presented. I really think it's
Does
an
the public
opportunity
need
for
her to
us
present?
to ask
Okay.
questions of her based on the written evaluation, anything else that, we want to ask about. And then,
Okay.
at the end, we're going to give her opportunity to respond to anything she thinks needs to be responded to in both the jurisdictional and public comment portion of the meeting. So, as modified, I guess.
So it's a little unfair to ask General Steckler to respond to specific public comments in this venue. If she wanted to respond in writing at a later date or in some fashion, that's one thing. So this is,
That should be at the discussion
yeah,
meeting.
I mean, this is an opportunity for us to get information from her and from the public. And certainly if we have questions about her narrative, I think it's reasonable to ask those questions. But I don't think it's fair to ask her to respond to specific public comments. What are your?
Yeah, and I think as opposed to putting her on the spot to address every single comment, I think that's right. That's probably that's not ideal. But if she wants to, in each case, to defend herself if someone's attacking her, I think that's fair. I would just leave it up to her, and then afterwards we could have a more formalized response from the Inspector General.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. So the public meeting to commence with jurisdictional and public comments, then questions, if any, for General Steckler, and discussion by us or clarifications by us. Is that
Call it general discussion.
general discussion? Because I'm going to have to write this up. Okay, and this meeting would be plus or minus 6 hours, starting at 1, ending at, well, if no one comes to comment, it'll be shorter. So we've got 2 hours for jurisdictional comment, 2 hours for public comment, 1 hour for clarifications and discussion with General Steckler, and then 1 hour for our general discussion-ish. Does that sound too much, too little?
It does sound like a lot. I was wondering if we can condense it so it
I'd
doesn't have
love
to be a
to
6-hour
condense it.
meeting. Yeah.
I'm hoping for some consensus here about this meeting.
I didn't think we were going to have a general discussion among ourselves at that time.
No.
This is just a
Okay.
fact-finding, informational, we're going to go home, sleep on it, probably very well,
Okay.
and then we're going to wake up the next
Okay.
few days and fill out our own forms, and then come in and discuss it among ourselves in a separate meeting.
Okay, so that's a 5-hour
And
meeting.
I do have one of those cards where you buy one pizza, you get one free, so if you want me to bring it, I will.
Would you like to devote less time to the jurisdictions or to the public?
I think it's important to do 2 hours,
Okay.
but I would suggest 30-minute breaks in between, just so that we can get a cup of coffee.
Then we'll have an
or
8-hour
whatever.
meeting.
So, well, that's 2 hours for jurisdiction, it's 2 hours for public, a total of 1 hour for a break, and then an hour for a question. So that's 2, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, so if we start at 1, it seems to me that we could do with 15-minute breaks and
Okay.
end at 6:30. Is that
Well, I don't know when we'll end, but...
more or less? We have to book a room, so we have to have a rough idea
Well, I
of.
think after 6 o'clock,
Okay.
it's not
And so
gonna
we
be
have
used.
some time after 4 o'clock for people, and we have some time before 4 o'clock. Is that
Right.
roughly
And
satisfactory? Okay, for this meeting. And the meeting should take place roughly, how long will you need to produce your report?
At least 30 days, if not.
Say again?
At least 30 days. End of
Okay, so the
October.
meeting will take place on or after 30 days from now?
I'm looking at the calendar, Madam Chair, if we want to maybe do October 30th, which is a Wednesday. Right before Halloween, so we can all come in costume.
Oh, we're not in costume now? Okay, so the suggestion by Mr. Merriman is that September 30th would be ideal.
October 30th.
October
So
30th.
sorry.
I mean, I'm just, I don't know the availability of this particular room, but usually Wednesday afternoon and night is okay.
Ms. Levesque is shaking her head at me that she knows
She does?
the availability of
she
this room.
looks it up.
The room is available on October 30th.
Would folks take a moment and consult your calendars and see if that's,
I will be in Arizona teaching.
okay, so that's not a good day.
We go to Arizona and have a meeting.
I'll meet you in the airport halfway.
I
No.
will most likely also be tied up then. How about the following Wednesday?
The following Wednesday is November 6th. No, we're getting no's on November 6th. All right, Monday, November 4th. Not that week at all. Let's back up. October 28th,
I'll still be in Arizona.
still be in Arizona. Back 25th.
I think I'm in trial for 2 weeks then.
Ending then or at then? When are you first available in October then? Not at all.
I think I'll be tied up through November 1st, from the 21st
Okay,
to
so
the 1st.
November 13th.
Nothing the week of the 4th. November 13. I can get here by 1. So
Good.
this will be required. How about the 15th, November 15th?
What day of the week is that?
Friday.
Friday.
The 13th available.
Friday the 13th?
No.
15th,
We
Friday
just
the
had that last
15th.
week.
Oh, okay.
We're good for a while.
I'm not available past 5 o'clock that night.
Friday's night's not a good time for public
Okay.
stuff.
Good
What's
about
wrong
the
with the 13th? November.
I'm trying to avoid having to drive to Miami and back in the same day, that's all. But if it must, it
13th is
must.
what day? You say you're not
Wednesday.
available?
I'm not, November, yeah, I'm not good. November,
Mr. Ehrenberg.
oops. Yeah, I'm not able to make November 8th to 18th. I'm gone. I'm out of town. Oh,
8th to 18th.
yeah, I'm out 8 to 18.
How about the next week? I actually like all this time, especially if we are going to try and visit with the IG.
Yeah.
We want to review her report. I think this is fine. This
So
is
where
gonna
are we
be
now?
I think the week,
18th.
like, what's the 20th like for everybody?
No.
The 19th or the 21st or the 22nd?
Week of the 18th. Everyone pick a date, the week of the 18th, that we're all available.
18.
November?
In
November
November.
You're on the 18th?
Monday.
All of them.
Thanksgiving the following week, so we'll be okay.
Yeah.
How's the 18th? No, yes?
I think Mr. Ehrenberg's just kind of getting back. Is there any other day that week I'm good in?
22?
20th?
You'd rather not do it? Rather not do it on a
Friday.
Friday, because you might lose a little bit of impact.
20th, I think, would be good. That's a Wednesday.
20th or
No,
21st?
I'm not available on the 20th.
How about the 21st?
21st, I can get here by 1:30, 1.
Okay, 21st for everyone?
21st is good.
That's good? Okay. 21st.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to do it
Thursday.
on the 22nd anyhow.
The 21st is available on the VCC calendar.
Is.
It is.
Okay,
Okay.
can you book us from 1:30 to, I don't know, 7:30?
Absolutely.
Round numbers?
Sounds.
Sooner if we can.
When is Thanksgiving?
28th.
28th.
Just making sure.
So then we better book the next meeting because, folks leave town for the holidays. So we have to have the decision meeting 2 weeks after that, roughly.
I'd suggest the first week of December, anytime, but not our meeting day.
The 4th,
It's okay with me.
December 4th. Everyone, anyone?
Hold on.
The problem with that for me is that then you have December 4th of lengthy meeting, then we have December 5th of lengthy meeting, and it takes a big chunk out of my time.
Okay, do you have an alternate date you'd like to suggest?
Well, how about the following week, or the 9th?
9?
If that's the only day available, I'll make myself available. It just takes a lot of time out of my...
The week of December 2nd is not available the
Okay.
entire week.
That makes life easy.
What's available the week of December 9th?
9th, 10th, and
Okay.
13th are available.
All right, 9? Everyone?
Sure.
All right, December
Okay.
9 is D-Day for us, not December 7th. 9, we will have to make our decision, and everyone agrees?
Yes.
Excellent.
What time did you say?
1:30 to 7.
No, no.
No.
No?
December
Oh,
9th.
I'm
This is
sorry.
decision
I
meeting.
I beg your pardon. Anyone want to suggest a time that is most felicitous for them? I'm indifferent.
Want to do 9:30?
9:30? I can't imagine that this would be a lengthy meeting.
No, not after all that input.
9:30 on the 9th. Should we allow 3 hours just in case, just to book the room? Do you think less?
Noontime's fine.
That's fine.
All right, 9:30 till noon.
And on November 20th, you want it from 1 p.m., 7?
November, I thought it was.
How about
I thought I said
1:30?
October.
1:30, since I'm coming from Miami, and I never know.
It's the 21st, right?
Correct.
What are you going to call the November 21st meeting?
Workshop and public meeting. Although I guess workshop is there another term we should use for that?
Workshop is fine.
Okay. It's a workshop and public meeting. Okay.
Madam Chair, is that to start at noon?
I'm sorry. 1:30. 1:30 to 7 on the 21st.
And then on December 9th.
Will be 9:30 till noon.
9:30. And what are you calling that meeting?
Inspector General renewal.
Contract renewal?
A contract discussion? Renewal, contract renewal. Yeah, let's call it what it is. Okay. So we have a plan. Yes, please.
So I have a motion that in our notice, we also put language that allows for written comment to be received, whatever period of time, some period of time prior to,
You can put it like,
I'm sorry, prior to the actual meeting.
Who will receive this?
Can it go to a county office?
I'll second that motion.
Yours?
We have a motion and a second that the notice of the public meeting include that folks may make their comments in writing to,
If this is the board's, the committee's desire, we can set up a separate mailbox just for that input.
and so that would be a mailbox that is only available to us?
Well, we will
To
get
them.
it, and then if you constrain it in any way that says things like you must include your name and address, then you would get they would all be public, but you would get what you were looking for.
Okay. Yes, I think their name and address has to be on it, and it has to be validated. Because email addresses don't include names. Their numbers, their whatever. So it would have to be validated so that we know that they're not duplications. You know, they're not.
When you indicate mailboxes, you mean email boxes as well as regular mailboxes?
We can do both. We can accept hard copies or emails. I think most people like doing emails, but either way is fine.
I think we should include either medium to be accepted.
I'm not necessarily comfortable on the validated. What is the validation? What are the standards? At what
That the
point does it
person
get
actually is
rejected?
a resident of Palm Beach County and that address exists. It's not a,
That it's their residence, that it isn't, how long it is, I mean, I don't think they can do
That would be, I think, difficult for us to do any kind of validation. I mean,
We just need a name and address, and a
Right.
phone number would be nice in case.
Yeah.
But-
we can ask them for whatever you want, but to actually follow up on that,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother matter.
Well, if anyone chooses not to give enough information for us to say that it looks like a real person, we can just discredit what they say.
Right. I think we
Not
should
review
accept, we should accept whatever's brought us and make independent determination of what we want to adopt. Right.
So if I understand correctly, there's a motion to accept comments by any venue, as long as they come with an identified name, address, phone number. Is that,
That we would review it, and then it's up to us, obviously, to give it credibility or weight, right?
Right.
Okay, all right.
but the request should say, include your name.
The request will say that, but once someone sends us an email, it's public record,
I understand.
Right,
no matter what
Okay.
they said.
So that is the motion.
yes.
Any further discussion? Was there a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Sec-
seconded it.
All
Oh,
right.
Ms. Archer seconded it.
That's okay.
So this is a motion by Ms. Howitt, seconded by Ms. Archer. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Fiore says no. Everyone else is a yes on that motion. Thanks.
And what will be the deadline for submitting?
What was the date of the meeting again?
November 21st?
Probably a week or just a few days before. I mean, if it's emailed, it happens pretty fast. So.
Well, if it's November 21st and we need time to review these, and we don't know how many there will be,
we can put a deadline of a week before the meeting.
Yeah.
I need more time than that. I
Well,
mean,
these are to be reviewed by us prior to our final determination.
it's September now. I think we could say October 30th.
That's fine. Sure.
Well, but we're having a public meeting, and I think the input should be before the public meeting, not a month before, because we'll have time after it to review.
I think it should be November 21st. Public comment is going to be received by the committee on
Fine.
November 21st. If you cannot attend, please provide your written comments by said date. And then between the 21st and December 9th, we have a chance to review whatever it is we want to review and make our determinations. So I think we should allow,
2.5 weeks.
That's
So,
fine.
everybody?
Sure.
Anybody? Okay. So-
review all three of them.
That is the will of the committee. What other direction or, do you need anything else from us to move this
I think
forward?
so. Just, if I may summarize, we will make the changes to the document within the next day or two, get that back to the committee. We will work with Ms. Levesque on if there are any scheduling issues that need to be ironed out, and we will work on the notice, which will simultaneously be a public notice as well as an invitation-type notice to the jurisdictions. We will include in the public notice that there will be written public comment, which will be accepted up until the meeting, and we will get hard copies of those as when they're finally accumulated to the committee.
Question. I'm assuming there will be some sort of minutes from the public meeting?
Sure.
That'll probably be quite lengthy. I think the minutes are something that we will need for input prior to the December 9th meeting, if that's
Yeah,
possible.
I was only up to the 21st meeting, and then
Yeah.
after that,
Just a technical question.
Sure.
Were you to send me, I don't know, some number of emails as a PDF, my mailbox would reject them for size. So they need to be available via some sort of external Dropbox kind of thing. In other words, they can't be a PDF.
got it. I guess we can figure out some way of dealing with that with
Okay.
our technical folks.
Yes. Other questions, comments, needs, objections? I have a question for General Steckler. I'm not sure I heard you this morning. We were talking about the accreditation, and the summary is on your website, but I thought I heard you say the entire thing is not because it's 1,000
No.
pages?
No, the report is on the website.
Okay. So it's the item that is under standards, that is the entire report?
That is the entire report. correct.
Okay. So what was it that you were referencing that was 1,000 pages that couldn't be, or I misheard?
Yeah.
Withdraw the question then. Okay, I just want to make sure I have the whole accrediting
Yeah.
report.
No, it's
Good.
I think it's about 15 pages or something. Yeah, it's up there.
Okay. You guys did great.
I move for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn
I'll second it.
with a second. Commissioner Archer motions the adjournment. Commissioner Gallo seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much.